Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to DBR Bites, episode number 4. We're going to keep up the numbering of DBR Bites sort of as long as we can keep track. It is now 2 numbers we have to track in terms of episodes instead of just 1, but I think we can handle it. I am your host for this episode. I am Sam Klein. I am joined by Jason Evans, who will be in attendance at the Georgia Tech Duke basketball game this Saturday in Atlanta. Jason, are you excited to see the Blue Devils again?
Yes, I am, especially because I'm very, very hopeful that the result will be better than when I was at Clemson just a week or so ago.
Excellent. All right, so we need to preview that Georgia Tech game. We also need to very quickly touch on the McDonald's All-American rosters, which came out yesterday and which feature a few future Blue Devils. So let's start, though, with the Georgia Tech game. Duke plays Georgia Tech, like I said, on Saturday. Jason's going to be in attendance. Jason, I guess before we get into the details of what to expect in the game, I know you're going to be there. Are you available to see any listeners before or after the game?
Yes. So here's what I'm going to do. And as I mentioned on our last podcast, we've had a number of folks who've been like, hey, Jason, I'd love to meet you. I'd love to see you at the Georgia Tech game. So I'm going to be at the varsity before the game. If you are someone who's coming in town who doesn't know the city of Atlanta, just Google the varsity. It is a legendary greasy spoon restaurant. It's huge, by the way. So I'll be in one of the rooms on the ground floor. Let me put it that way. And I'll probably like make a little sign or something that'll say Duke Basketball Report or something like that, so people can find me. I'll certainly be wearing a Duke cap. I can't wear a lot of Duke paraphernalia. Sam, as you know, when you go sit on press row, it's sort of frowned on to be too much of a fan. You have to be a little bit dispassionate. A Duke baseball cap is perfectly fine, but I'm not going to be wearing I have a Grant Hill jersey that I sometimes wear to games. I won't be wearing my Grant Hill jersey on press row.
Yeah, I think the Grant Hill jersey would be inappropriate, but yes, you can be subtle enough and people can figure it out. All right.
Yeah,
so that's that.
I forget. I'm not sure if 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
The game starts at 3. I'll be at the varsity at 2 o'clock, enjoying a chili dog and a chili burger and a peach pie. Sam, have you ever had a varsity peach pie?
No, but sounds like a good way for me to fall asleep during the second half of the game.
No, dude, legendary. Deep fried peach pies at the varsity are like, chef's kiss. They are like one of my favorite things in the world to eat. By doing this, my wife cannot tell me I can't have one because she won't be there to stop me. So I'll be enjoying my peach pie at the varsity at 2 o'clock, probably till around 2:30 or so. Then I'll head over to the game. It's easy walking distance from one to the other. But anyway, if there are any DBR podcast listeners out there attending the Georgia Tech game, come on by the varsity, find me and say hi, and we will connect and all that other fun stuff.
Great. Okay, so on to the actual game. When we previewed the Virginia Tech game, we said Virginia Tech is on this losing streak, and we really hope that it doesn't end against Duke. We hope that Duke is able to continue Virginia Tech's losing streak. Obviously, that did not come to pass. I am going to issue the exact same intro to this Georgia Tech game, which is Georgia Tech is coming in on a 6-game losing streak. They are merely 1-9 in ACC play. Jason, how likely is it that Duke is going to continue Georgia Tech's losing streak, which was most recently extended by Clemson just last night in Littlejohn? It was a blowout victory for Clemson. How likely is Duke to continue that against Georgia Tech?
I think it's pretty likely that the Blue Devils are going to win this game. It's a very different situation than Virginia Tech that was struggling mightily in the ACC. Georgia Tech struggles are not a team that has been losing a lot of close games, a team that had impressive wins earlier in the season and seems to have run into some bad luck. No offense to Georgia Tech and Josh Pashner, who is a friend of the podcast and a guy I've met on several different occasions. This Georgia Tech team just appears to be bad. Like you said, they have an 8-12 record, just 1-9 in the ACC. And look, they had a close loss to Notre Dame in overtime. Early in the year, they lost to Utah by 4. But most of these Georgia Tech losses are double-digit losses. And they've gotten smacked down by 15-plus points 6 different times this year. And this just doesn't look like a very good Georgia Tech team. You mentioned they're on a 6-game losing streak. They've lost 4 of those 6 games by double digits. Now, this is not to say they're incapable of winning games, especially at home, because they beat UGA. Georgia is decent competitive in the SEC. They beat Miami Look, we know Miami's good. Both those games were at home, and they were much earlier in the season. It appears this Georgia Tech team is better at home than on the road by a significant margin. And it's worth noting that just a week or so ago, they were pretty competitive with Pitt. And we know Pitt's a decent ACC team. They're very competitive with Pittsburgh in a home game until Pitt stretched it out late. But I just feel like I don't know what Duke is going to show up. We've seen Duke teams that have really, really struggled. I feel like Georgia Tech is on a different level. To me, if this is a really close competitive game deep into the second half, I will be a little bit disappointed, at least, that Duke hasn't found a way to improve what they've been doing lately.
There's nothing on Georgia Tech's schedule, maybe other than that Miami win, that indicates that Georgia Tech has what it takes to beat a top team. I guess the question right now is what is Duke really playing at? Because they've been kind of all over the place the last couple weeks, and we still don't know. I mean, we know that Dariq Whitehead is at least out for the moment, and we're pretty sure that he's not playing on Saturday, but we don't know sort of the how good Jeremy Roach is going to feel. We know that in that Virginia Tech game, there was a fair amount of fatigue from the Blue Devils that they hopefully have time now to rest and recover.
Sam, it is worth noting that, first of all, in terms of Jeremy Roach, that game was less than 48 hours or approximately 48 hours after Duke's previous game on Saturday. I think some of that fatigue may have been Duke's players playing, essentially a really, really close to a back-to-back games. And we have a much longer stretch ahead of this contest with Georgia Tech.
And then starting to look into the actual matchup here, I think this thing that stands out to me the most, Jason, and you'll touch on this, I think, a little more, is the extent to which Duke should have an enormous size and rebounding advantage against the Yellowjackets.
Oh boy, yeah, big time. This is a Tech team that is a fairly small team. They have a senior big man, Rodney Howard, who's the only guy on the team who's taller than 6'8". But he's a very limited player. We're talking about a guy who averages like 5 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, basically plays right around half the game for them. He's been playing a little more than half lately, just because Georgia Tech, I think, has been getting clobbered on the boards and knows that they have a size challenge. And so they've been trying to get him in more and more. But this is not someone who you would expect to have a big impact on the game. He's not going to block a lot of shots. He's not going to grab a ton of rebounds. He's probably going to have his hands full dealing with Ryan Young and the other Duke post players. The big advantage Duke's going to have is in Kyle Filipowski, who's going to be matched up, I would imagine, with either sophomore Dallin Coleman or Jalen Moore. Both of them are sophomores, and good luck to them trying to stop Kyle. They're both like 6'6", 6'7". They're going to be giving up 20-plus pounds to Kyle Filipowski. I think that's a really, really bad matchup for Georgia Tech. And then just across the board, Duke is going to be bigger at virtually every position on the floor, perhaps significantly bigger at a lot of them.
And even without Dariq Whitehead, Duke still has plenty of a size advantage against Georgia Tech. The other thing that kind of stands out to me, Jason, and maybe you can touch on this more, is Georgia Tech's sort of limited offensive ability. They're not a good three-point shooting team, so I imagine you'll see a lot of clanging three-pointers all over the place in this one, because Duke has not quite figured out how to write that, at least in a repeatable way. And they're not even really great at scoring from the interior. Like you said, they're a little undersized. And so Georgia Tech, especially against an ACC slate, is having a really hard time scoring the basketball.
Yeah, let me get into their advanced stats, because this is what you're sort of leaning me toward. They're ranked 163rd, Georgia Tech is, in KenPom, 213th on offense, which really, like you said, really struggling on offense. 129th on defense, which also isn't good, but it's certainly better than what they are on offense. The only thing they do well on offense is hang on to the ball. This is a Georgia Tech team that does not commit a lot of turnovers, so they get a ton of shots, but they don't make those shots. They are 295th in the country in 3-point field goal percentage. Like, we think Duke's a bad 3-point shooting team. This Georgia Tech team, right there alongside Duke as one of the worst 3-point field goal teams in the country. And then to make things even worse, when they get closer to the basket, they're 279th in 2-point field goal percentage shooting. They don't shoot their free throws. They're less than 70% from the free throw line. you know, they're just every sort of metric that you have for measuring how a team does on offense. Georgia Tech, for a Power 5 conference team, is really bad at them. And I should mention one of the things that they are like among the 10 worst teams in the country at is getting to the free throw line. Their percentage of free throws that they take compared to their other shots is like, again, in the bottom 10 in the country. So, you know, they just don't score in easy ways. They don't score in difficult ways. They don't score a lot. On defense, the one thing they do is they protect the 3-point line pretty well. Their opponents hit just under 31% of their threes in the season, which is, a really good number for a defense. The problem for Georgia Tech is Duke's not going to be relying on the 3-point line a lot. We've talked all season about the fact that Duke's not a great 3-point shooting team. And the only other thing that Georgia Tech does well on defense is they block shots fairly well. But they play at a slow pace. I expect this to be a really low scoring affair. And, this Georgia Tech team, I'm struggling to find places of optimism for them when facing Duke. The only real one would be if Duke has another one of these games on the road where we just can't hit the broadside of a barn.
The other challenge that Josh Pastner's team has this year is something that is similar to Duke, other than the 3-point shooting, is the lack of experience in their roles. You see a Georgia Tech team with a lot of transfers who are relatively young. It's not like it's full of grad students, and the returning players for Georgia Tech are all playing much bigger roles than they have in the past. So if you go look at like the top minutes getters from last season on Georgia Tech, almost none of them are still in Atlanta playing for Josh Pastner. So this has been a just ongoing challenge for him this year, is how to figure out how to use the lineup that he has this season, which is so different.
Well, Sam, you may recall a few years ago, it was like 3 or 4 years ago, we interviewed Josh Pastner on this program. Folks, if you haven't heard that interview, a lot of what he has to say are things that would still apply today. And one of the things I vividly remember Josh Pastner saying to us was, we need to get old and stay old, which I thought was a really, really interesting comment from him. He was saying that, look, he can't compete with Duke and UNC and the stud freshmen. So his teams need to rely on guys who are more experienced and a little bit older. And when he won the ACC title a couple of years ago, that's what they did. They had a team that was just loaded with guys who were, at least in their third year, many of them in their fourth and even fifth year of playing college basketball. And that's just not the case. As you alluded to, that is not the case anymore. They are mostly sophomores. So they're not old. I'm sure in a couple of years, they'll be old again and they'll probably be very competitive again. But this year, they are absolutely not old. And as a result, they are really struggling to keep up with other teams in the ACC.
So that's the Georgia Tech game that will be played on Saturday. Like we said, Jason will be in attendance. So make sure you, if you're going to be there, go find him and bother him for a few minutes, which is great. And Jason will look forward to your report from that one. And then, of course, we will recap that game after it happens. Not sure if we'll get to do that immediately following Saturday or if we needs to wait till Sunday. But hopefully it's not eventful enough that we feel compelled to do it immediately.
Sam, there are 2 other really quick things I wanted to mention regarding this Georgia Tech game. The first one is, as we've heard, we know Dariq Whitehead. I guess we don't know it for a fact. There's no way Dariq Whitehead is going to be playing on Saturday. We don't know how long he's going to be out. On the last podcast, we were all very, very pessimistic. There's been some rumors, I would call them, that maybe Dariq Whitehead's injury isn't as bad as initially feared, that maybe it's not something like a torn Achilles and that he may make it back at some point. We have nothing confirmed about that, but I just want folks to know that's a possibility still, which is great news for Duke. But the first thing I want to look at is, how does Duke's rotation change with no Dariq Whitehead? I think it's easy to see Jeremy Roach slipping back into the starting lineup. That was almost to be expected anyway. But the question is, what does it do to the guard rotation? Maybe does this make room for Jaden Schutt? Perhaps a little bit. I mean, Jalen Blakes has also been banged up with the mask and the nose. There's a possibility there that we begin to see a little bit of Jalen Blakes against Jaden Schutt against Georgia Tech. So that's something I'm really looking forward in this game. And then the other thing is, I went ahead and looked at Duke's shooting at home and on the road, because There's just a huge difference. And this Duke team, if they're going to make anything out of this season, they're going to have to figure out how to shoot away from Cameron. I'm going to give you the numbers, Sam, and I don't think they'll surprise you, but they are still shocking numbers. So Duke averages 79 points per game at home. Big number. Granted, that number is skewed a little bit because Duke plays a lot of lesser opponents at home, those bye games. But still, 79 points per game at home. We're only averaging 65 points per game on the road. In terms of 2-point field goals, Duke hits 46% at home. Could be better. Believe me, I think as a team you should be shooting for 50%, but Duke's at 46% on 2-point field goals at home, only 40% on 2-point field goals on the road. That's an atrocious number. 40% is really, really bad. And here come the 3-point numbers. Oh my gosh, the 3-point numbers are stunning. At home, Duke's hitting 37.3% of our 3-point field goals. That's a great number. 37% from three. If this Duke team hit 37% from three all the time, we would be one of the best teams in the country. No question about it. The bad thing is on the road, Duke's hitting only 26.2%, barely a quarter. So there's just such huge splits in what this team does at home and on the road in terms of their shooting. I'm hoping maybe this Georgia Tech game will be the beginning of reversing that trend. Because if this Duke team starts to hit some shots on the road, and we hit some shots against Virginia Tech. I mean, we boosted those numbers against Virginia Tech. If we keep on shooting like that, then we become a much, much more dangerous team. And all the predictions that, this Duke team's in huge trouble, go out the window. If this team starts to shoot a little bit better, if we shoot on the road a little bit closer to the way we shoot at home.
Well, let's see if Duke can manifest that against an undersized Georgia Tech team. This will be, I think, one of the easiest games, hopefully, that Duke has the rest of the way in conference. So
at least in terms of road games.
Definitely. So, yeah. Jason, I think we've gone long enough that we need to take a quick break. When we get back, we will touch on the McDonald's All-American game rosters, which feature 3 Duke Blue Devils, or at least Duke Blue Devils as of the fall of 2023. Stay tuned. All right, we're back, and we need to, Jason, quickly touch on the McDonald's All-American game, which, among others, is going to feature 3 incoming Blue Devils. Mackenzie Mbako, Sean Stewart, and Jared McCain are all going to be on the team. Mbako and Stewart are playing for the East team. McCain is playing for the West team. There are 2 other Duke recruits coming in next year who did not make the McDonald's All-American game. TJ Power is not eligible for this game. He is a 5th year. Caleb Foster, Jason, do we want to say that Caleb Foster is the snub here because he is eligible for this game, and according to the composite rankings, he's one of the top 20 recruits in the country, but he is not on the roster for the McDonald's All-American game. Do you want to start with him?
Yeah, sure. There's little question that Caleb Foster, he's the highest rated player who didn't make the McDonald's All-American game, and a lot of people looked at the roster and were like, how on earth does Caleb Foster not make it into this game? I mean, the reality is, I think they felt like they had to pick Bronny James. And by the way, I don't blame Bronny James. He didn't do anything wrong. He's incredibly famous, and everyone wants to see him. I'm sure that the ratings for the McDonald's All-American game will be far, far better with him in it than they would have been without him in it. And let's not forget, the game is televised. The attention that the game brings to the players and to McDonald's and to ESPN and everybody, it matters. So I think they kind of had to pick Bronny James, and they had to leave someone out. They decided to leave Caleb Foster out. It's not that big a deal. Caleb Foster will get to play in other high school all-star games. There are several of them now that have a lot of the same players sort of shifting around in them. I mean, like, look, last year, Kyle Filipowski was also a 5th-year guy, so he wasn't able to participate in, he wasn't a 5th-year guy, but Flip was the guy who was snubbed for the McDonald's All-American game. And people were like, oh, how could you do that to Flip? He ended up playing in other all-star games against the same players. So it's not that big a deal. We'll still get to see Caleb Foster performing against these top players. I just can't get upset about it.
And which, if any of the Blue Devils, the future Blue Devils, are you most excited to see either in this game or on this All-Star circuit at the end of the season. Mbako, remember, is kind of the biggest recruit that Duke has coming in, at least the highest rated. But any of them that you're particularly excited to see in this environment?
It's a cop out to say I'm excited for all three of them. I think I'm most excited for Jared McCain. It feels to me like Jared McCain is the guy who has elevated his stature and his ranking the most over the past 6 months or since last summer, since he committed to Duke. We need an outside shooter. Jared McCain appears to be one of the, if not the best shooters in the class. And look, he's a kid. I follow him on TikTok. He's a ton of fun. He's got millions of followers on TikTok. He's just a fun kid with an effervescent personality. I think there's a decent chance he may be at Duke for more than 1 year, and we love to hear about that. So I think Jared McCain's the guy. I'm interested in seeing how he does, with that outside shot and with his scoring ability against other elite high school players, because sometimes what guys do in high school doesn't translate well to the college level.
Really? Do we have any recent examples of that?
Oh yeah. Hey, look, in the McDonald's All-American game last year, I went back and I looked up the stats. The best player in the game was Cam Whitmore, who went to Villanova. The other top performers in the game were Mark Mitchell, Dariq Whitehead, and Keontae George, who went to Baylor. Look, those guys have all been good this season, but other than maybe Keontae George, none of those guys are going to be all conference players. I'm not sure any of those guys are the best player on their. I know for a fact Cam Whitmore's not the best player in Villanova. Mark Mitchell, Dariq Whitehead are not the best players on Duke. Again, Keontae George maybe a little bit, but the other thing is the two worst players in the game last year, the two worst players in the McDonald's All-American game, like barely scored at all, didn't play a lot, had no impact on the game, were Brandon Miller and Grady Dick. Brandon Miller is probably going to be the SEC Player of the Year. Plays for Alabama, is having an incredible season. And Grady Dick is a ridiculous shooter for top 10 ranked Kansas. Duke saw that up close, earlier this season. I feel like the McDonald's All-American game maybe doesn't tell us very much at all.
So, so you'd think the McDonald's All-American game is really more for fun than it is for projecting sort of who the stars of college basketball or even of the G League are going to be next season.
Yeah, because these all-star games, they don't have enough practice to really get to know each other and do things in a very sophisticated kind of way. I talked about the fact that Kyle Filipowski did not play in the McDonald's game. He played in some of the other all-star games last summer and didn't look that good. A lot of people were saying, oh, it looks like he's having trouble getting his shot off. He looks just slow against these other players. I'm not sure he's going to be much of an impact for Duke. He's having an incredible freshman season. In fact, we should do a DBR Bites at some point debating the best freshman seasons in Duke history. I think Kyle Filipowski might be higher on the list than you would expect. That's how good of a season he's having. It's not even done yet, but I just, it's fun to watch these guys. It's great to get a hint at what they can do, especially against other really, really good players. But in terms of being predictive about what they'll be in college, we are seeing this year up close, both among Duke guys and a lot of other guys, that just because you play great or just because you play terrible, it doesn't say all that much about how you're going to play once you get to college.
I'm now looking over the list of the top recruits for next season, and I need to make an amendment, or I need to retract a statement I made many months ago about recruiting, which is that I mentioned that it was incredible that Mark Mitchell and Grady Dick were playing on the same high school team in this, at this school in Kansas, Sunrise Christian. Yeah. Sunrise Christian has 4 of the top 50 basketball recruits on their team this season. And that's just among guys who are in the senior class. Yeah. Only one of them is playing. Only one of them is playing in the McDonald's All-American game, but 4 of the top 50 go to Mark Mitchell and Grady Dick's high school in Kansas.
Yeah. Sunrise Christian is becoming another Montverde Academy, and there are a few other schools like that. Sierra Canyon out in California. There are these schools across the country in different regions where if you're like a top 100 basketball player in your class, you're like, I need to go to that school, play with other guys who are top 100 players. They all just basically play each other all year long. Like, they don't even bother to play other high school teams in their area because it's, it'd be outrageous. They'd win the games by 50, 100 points or more. They're very much becoming basketball finishing schools. it is what it is. We've seen basketball becoming a bigger and bigger deal further and further down the line, in college, in high school, on the AAU circuit. I'm not at all surprised that these guys are all flocking to these places where they get the best coaching, the best facilities, and the best competition.
All right, Jason, any other commentary on the McDonald's All-American game before we get out of here?
Yeah, just super quick. I wanted to mention Bronny James, and he is, you have to talk about him for at least a second. Because I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he does in this game. He is considering apparently Ohio State, Oregon, and USC. I think it's LeBron has said that there may be a few other schools on the list. Duke is apparently not one of the schools. We were considered connected to Bronny James at one point earlier in his high school career. I think LeBron and Bronny really want him to go someplace where he can be a truly featured player, and that's just going to be difficult at Duke because Bronny's just ranked a little bit lower than most of the other guys in the Duke class. But I'm just really interested in seeing how he does in this game and following his career, because it's so compelling that one of the top 2, top 3, whatever you want to call it, maybe number 1 basketball players of all time has a son who's old enough to play with his dad at some point. And that's just exciting and fun to think about. And the other thing I wanted to note about Bronny really quickly is that there was a little article I read about him that mentioned that one ACC coach said he'd tried to get involved in recruiting Bronny, but he couldn't even get through to him. Like, literally, this is different than any other recruitment, because this ACC coach said he had to talk to a publicist who would then give him a time that he could talk to Bronny's mother. Talking to Bronny was off limits. Talking to LeBron, of course, is off limits, but you can talk to the mom on Tuesdays and Thursdays if you make an appointment. That's crazy for a high school recruit. It's absolutely bonkers. And there was an SEC coach who said that they wanted to get involved, but it was like too difficult. They couldn't get involved in recruiting him. They couldn't figure it out until they went, oh, well, we'll move on to other players because it's just too hard, too difficult to even get in touch with this kid.
And it comes with a lot of attention because you get LeBron, but then you also have to deal with all of that. And if you are not a school that is prepared for that sort of craziness, then it's probably not worth the effort. And the difficulty in contacting him is probably emblematic of that sort of thing. All right, Jason, we're getting out of here. There may be more bites before the game on Saturday, so stay tuned for that. Donald also may be back for one of those, although he's not on this episode. So for Jason Evans, who is here, for Donald Wine, who is not, but who is always with us in spirit, I am Sam Klein. This has been DBR Bites, episode number 4. Stay in touch with us, DBR Podcast at gmail.com. We will talk to you again soon. Go hang out with Jason on Saturday at the Varsity before the Duke Georgia Tech game. Okay, I think that's it. Duke Band, take us home.
Do you find that your Ken Palm subscription logs you out like every time you walk away from the damn computer?
Yes, but I usually am doing this on my work computer where it like has all these security settings where it doesn't let me like stay logged into anything
Gotcha.
that's on my personal. So I don't do it regularly enough on my personal computer to have a sense for it. But yes, it logs me out a lot on my work computer.
I mean, it isn't a big deal to me that it does. I just logged right back in.
Yeah,
but I do notice that like literally.
The most annoying thing on the work computer is that it doesn't autofill passwords, so I have to go to my like password list to copy it in every time. It's like I remember, I know our KenPom password because it's like actually a logical password, but like I usually just have Google suggest a crazy password for everything, so right. I don't know any of my passwords. So if I'm ever like, oh, I want to look at like, whatever, if I want to like buy a plane ticket while I'm on my work computer, I have to go get my, Southwest Airlines password and then copy it in, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like,
no fun.
No.
Okay. I honestly can't believe that we're not at the point where we have biometrics that just do all this stuff. It should be your fingerprint, your face.
I mean, It is that way on my phone. The problem is that like on my work computer, there's all these, they have like extra security settings that they don't let me do that kind of stuff. So
right. No, I'm saying in general, the fact that passwords still exist is a mystery to me. I don't, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Let me give you a big Labor Day surprise. Most people think if we all exercise the same and eat the same, we'd all look the same. And let me tell you why that's wrong. Your body is unique and your metabolism is unique. I'm Lacey Green and I'm a super trainer at Body. That's BODI.com. And you can't see me, but I don't look like your average personal trainer. I'm curvy and I'm proud of it. So I created a program for beginners only on the Body app to show people like us how to get incredible results and be our version of happy and healthy. This isn't just workout videos. It's people like you and me. It's community. It's incredible trainers. It's easy to follow nutrition and mindset experts to help you reduce stress and just feel better. And you can get started with my new program called For Beginners Only. Now, here's the big surprise. If you go to body.com right now, that's BODI.com, not only can you get everything Body has to offer at 50% off with an annual membership, you'll also get an additional 20% off, but only during Labor Day weekend. Let's do this together. Go to body.com. That's body with an I.com.